Right. Nancy Pelosi earlier today said that the House will vote on legislation to guarantee access to abortion when they return to Washington later this month. Why? Why all of a sudden the movement? Well, that underscores the concern on the side of the left of what happened last night. The Supreme Court, late last night, refused to intervene and to stop the implementation of Texas's heartbeat bill. By a 5-4 decision, the court declined this last-minute plea from abortion businesses to stop Texas's Senate Bill 8, which essentially does this. It says no abortion after 6 weeks after the detection of a heartbeat. Now, this is big. This is big. This is the first time in 48 years that we actually see a way forward for America becoming a predominantly pro-life nation. Now, I know we've got Mississippi's bill that is before the court. They're going to hear arguments on that in the coming months. But this is a 6-week ban. This is quite significant. It's not the end of the challenges. I'm sure there's more challenges to come, and this is only temporary because litigation is ongoing. But how significant is this, and why was last night's decision important? Joining us now to talk about this is the Attorney General of the state of Texas, Ken Paxton. Ken, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Well, I'm glad to be back on a day like this where we had a significant victory as it relates to the pro-life movement that we've been fighting for decades.
Let's talk about that, the significance last night by a 5-4 decision that the court did not step in with an emergency rule saying, wait a minute, you can't implement this rule until it is, or this law, until we have finished litigation. Is that significant?
I think it's significant. I mean, we won't really know until the whole battle's, fought on this particular bill, because what they would have had to step into would be a little bit odd. The way it was structured was not anything the state is going to do. But what they did in this bill that I thought was so smart is they let individuals bring action against doctors and others who perform abortions in violation of this law. And so there's no real action to stop, and there's no litigation particularly to stop other than to try to stop a law from going into effect. And so I'm pleased that the court, because I think we'd had obviously a liberal court, they would have just stopped it before anything ever actually happened.
Well, you touched on a significant difference because we've had about a dozen states that have had very similar bills that banned abortion after 6 weeks, some after 20 weeks. But Texas's was different. And so all those others were blocked by the courts, kept from going into effect. I thought it was kind of a creative, clever way that the Texas law was structured. As you said, it allows individuals, for instance, someone who, let's say, drove someone to an abortion clinic, an individual could take action, file a suit against that individual. Explain how that would work.
Yeah, and I like the way you put it, clever. I talked to one of my guys who was involved in this, one of my guys in my Solicitor General's office, and I said I thought it was genius, because one of the other problems that we have, Tony, is you could pass a law like this, but then the individual DAs in Texas have control of whether it's enforced, if it's criminal. And so we have lots of DAs in Texas who just would not enforce the law. And that's a real problem because we don't have concurrent jurisdiction. I don't have concurrent jurisdiction to go do that. And so this puts in the hands of individuals, if they've been harmed or they see a harm under this statute that affects them and their families, they can bring an action anywhere. They don't have to be, sued in a liberal court in Travis County. They can go file where they're from. And potentially, if we have a actual trial, we might be able to get a better record for appeal than we would in some of these other courts that we've had to deal with in the past.
I often kind of detect how significant something is based upon the way the other side responds. And apoplectic is, they're just, their response is over the top. Here is Nancy Northrup. She's the head of the Center for Reproductive Rights. She was really kind of one of the spearheading organizations challenging the law. She said, quote, "We are devastated that the Supreme Court has refused to block a law that blatantly violates Roe v. Wade. Right now, people seeking abortions across Texas are panicking They have no idea where or when they will be able to get an abortion, if ever. Texas politicians have succeeded for the moment in making a mockery of the rule of law, upending abortion care, didn't know it was a care, in Texas, and forcing patients to leave the state if they have the means to get constitutionally protected health care. Of course, abortion is not health care. This should send chills down the spines of everyone in this country who cares about the Constitution. I think there are a lot of people concerned about the Constitution. They have been for 48 years since Roe v. Wade was found in the shadows of the Constitution.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in what she said. What's interesting to me is I was already asked today, well, do you regret Texas doing this because it's created so much controversy? And I'm like, well, Roe v. Wade itself was a pretty long stretch. Obviously, there was no precedent. There was no constitutional right to abortion. And the other side didn't mind taking big steps to implement what they wanted to do, which we would have said at the time, and we'll still say, was not constitutional, was illegal. And since then, it's just been a big mess with the rules changing. Instead of having a law on the books in Texas and every other state, we've got the Supreme Court changing the rules. Every time we get a new justice, we have a new idea how abortion should be done. It ought to be the elected representatives. What she's saying is untrue. This is not what Texas is doing is not unconstitutional. We're going back to the way it should be, which is the states should have control over this issue.
Of course, the Biden administration spokesman in the White House, Psaki, saying that, again, calling for the codification in law, which every time they say that, just reminds me, or it's an acknowledgement, I should say, that Roe v. Wade is not the law of the land. It is what the court has imposed upon the nation, but it's not the law. That's why they want to codify it into law.
No, you make such a great point. I mean, for all these years, Biden and his people and those people that believe that have been very happy that this wasn't in law, because it was in law before that in all of our states, and they were fine overruling 50 state laws to have the court tell us what their dream of abortion was. And now that the court is backing off on overruling every law in the country, they're like, no, now we need a federal law to stop the states from doing what they should be allowed to do.
So, General Paxton, let me ask you this. You've been in this fight for a long time. When you see what the court did, and you can't read too much into the court, but at least we know we had 5 justices on the Supreme Court that said, we're not going to step into this. We're going to let it go forward, and then we'll let this litigation play out. But when you consider that we have a case before the Supreme Court out of Mississippi, the Dobbs case, we're very close to seeing this nation move back to being a predominantly pro-life nation. I mean, I think all of the years in the pro-life movement, the legislators in the last decade and a half that have become aggressive in passing pro-life laws to protect the unborn. I mean, look, we have made a lot of progress, and I think we could be months away from seeing America revert back to a nation that fundamentally respects human life.
You know what? We've seen this before, have we not, with the abolitionist movement to free and end slavery? And that took decades and decades. It took some really amazing people fighting every day. And what I love about this movement is we have not given up. We have not quit. And you're right. The Mississippi case, my state is leading the amicus brief with 24 states, which is supporting Mississippi's law of banning abortion at 15 weeks. And this is the biggest effort, I think, ever with this case to directly overturn Roe v. Wade. We're not just saying it ought to be 15 weeks. We are addressing Roe v. Wade and saying this was incorrectly decided from the beginning. The judges keep changing the standard, and this ought to go back to the states. And so this is a huge effort, which is, as you said, when this case is heard, we're probably not far off from knowing whether we have a chance right now to put this back in the states and let them make the decision about whether we're going to protect life or not.
Yeah, it's very clear very important for it to be clear on that for the benefit of those that may be listening on this conversation, that what the court will do is it addresses this, what I think they may do, because the court is usually pretty limited in its decisions, narrow. Of course, this is a big issue. uh, as we see or would interpret the quote unquote overturning of Roe v. Wade, it's simply putting it back into the hands of the states where they found it. And then the states, which a vast majority are pro-life, in fact, many have trigger laws that they put into place that as soon as the court makes that decision, they will outlaw abortion in their state. So that's where people have the ability to interact with their local elected officials in their state legislatures, and also to vote with their feet by going to states that are pro-life. And I think it is really kind of packaged with other policies as well. And I think we'll see another clear division in the ideological lineup of the states.
You know what I love about this, Tony, though, is that I think we're right on this issue, and the science will tell us we're right. I think when we have a chance to explain, we have a debate in each of these states, whether you're in a liberal state or a conservative state, or Republican or Democrat, the facts are on our side. And the idea of ending human life is tragic and I think compelling. And so I would much rather have those debates in every single state than have a court dictate to us that, yes, we're going to allow everyone to kill babies.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And that's why we need to stay involved, no matter what the media may say, because the media wants us to be discouraged and to disengage, whether it's on this issue or any number of issues, election reform issues, which is also another issue that Texas is involved in. They want us to become discouraged, throw in the towel so that the left can dominate. That's the last thing we need to do. Let me go back very quickly before we run out of time, General Paxton. What is the next step in this law? As I said, there'll be more challenges. This isn't the end of it. It was just one decision last night to allow this law to go into effect. What's the next step?
So, I mean, the great thing is the law is in effect right now. So we're protecting human life. It's 6 weeks and more. And so that's every day that we have that in place, it's good. And so the legal challenge will come. They'll probably start in some court that's not necessarily friendly to our cause. But the reality is, I think now you'll start seeing lawsuits by individual plaintiffs that will also go up from courts that may do a better job of keeping track of the record, so that we'll have some good cases that we can go argue in front of appellate courts all the way up to the Supreme Court. My guess is we'll be back there someday.
Well, we'll be watching it very, very carefully. And again, grateful for the state of Texas that's leading out on a number of these critical issues, and grateful for you joining us today, General Paxton.
Hey, glad to do it. It's an important issue, and thanks for spending the time on it.
Absolutely.